The Ukrainian crisis is taking up most of the foreign policy and security bandwidth in Washington, D.C. right now. Of course, this was something that the U.S. and the Biden administration had been tracking for months, but I can say that we didn't really expect that there would be a full-out invasion. And certainly there's going to be implications of this war for East Asian security, even though the fighting is all taking place in Europe. And I think the most significant implication is the idea that defense and deterrence still matters. Those who thought that large defense budgets were a thing of the past may now have to eat their words, so to speak. China is not Russia, of course, and so in East Asia, in the Pacific, China is a large authoritarian country, but it's this idea now that a great power with ambition may be able to coerce or bully other states. And the fact that Putin has done it means that it's become a reality. Now, like I said, Xi Jinping he doesn't have the same calculus or logic as Putin. They operate differently, but it does send signals, and it's a reminder to other countries within the region that this is a reality, that military coercion and to actually be invaded is a reality. But my concern, of course, is that in thinking about defense and deterrence, that East Asia will become over-militarized and that we're going to see a widespread arms race. So defense and deterrence is obviously a good thing, but it can also lead to these repercussions just because of the way international politics works out, because of the conditions of anarchy and mistrust. You can also over-militarize and create a security dilemmas and a widespread arms race. So that is certainly a concern. One of the positive takeaways, if there could be one, in a large-scale war and devastation such as this, is that the United States and the Biden administration has exercised leadership fairly competently, I must say, in terms of rallying European allies, in terms of strengthening NATO. Many argue that the one thing that Putin did is the very thing they wanted to do, which is to avoid strengthening NATO and NATO shifting eastward. He may have actually unintentionally provoked. So in some ways, the U.S. has done, I think the Biden administration has done very well in rallying allies and partners around the world. In Europe, of course, we've seen solidarity for the most part in a Western response to the Russian invasion, but also in East Asia, we've seen allies committing to sanctions. So you had Japan, Australia, South Korea, Taiwan, these countries saying that they're going to place export controls on Russia, that they're not going to ship any goods to Russia during this time. And we've seen even countries like Japan, that's somewhat surprising because they don't have the most generous migration policy, saying that they would accept. And in fact, I think they have received some Ukrainian refugees within Japan. So we've seen a positive response among the U.S. and its ability to galvanize allies and partners together. So it is an opportunity, and oftentimes you never waste a good crisis. And I think the Biden administration has taken advantage of the Ukraine situation to try to strengthen its allies and partners and sustain what it prefers, the order it prefers, which is a liberal international order. So it's back to the whole triangle diplomacy of the Cold War era. I think Beijing there is some opportunity now with Beijing in the Biden administration. The Biden administration has been very forthcoming with Xi Jinping. They've been trying to share intelligence about Russia and saying this is what Russia is going to do. Let me just start with Beijing, though, because Beijing is in a very difficult position. They had this February 4th agreement. Putin and Xi had a February 4th agreement right before the Olympics that signaled that these two countries were going to work together, that they were going to move cooperatively. So that's in this triangle, that's one leg of the triangle that we've seen strengthen. But now the CCP, Xi Jinping, they're in a bad spot. Beijing did not expect an all-out invasion, or if they did, maybe they ignored the signs and fell into wishful thinking that Russia would only compel and threaten the Ukraine, but not actually engage in a full-scale invasion of a sovereign country, which of course Beijing also supports. Beijing supports Russia and the Ukraine. But now Beijing has to tread very carefully in its response to Russia and the West. And so we find Xi Jinping on this defensive where it has to weigh and calculate its relationship with the West, with the United States and the EU on one hand, and Russia with the other. And Beijing is learning what it means to be isolated from the international community, especially the West. I really think, as someone pointed out, I think it was Ukrainian President Zelensky who said, Russia is now becoming like a North Korea. So that creates space, that creates some room for the Biden administration to work with Xi Jinping.